Bank, 6,000 Palestinians detained, and over 388 dead in West Bank and East Jerusalem. This is the sort of punishment Israel is meting out in its genocidal campaign. And UK and US bombs continue to fall on Yemen, showing the true face of US and UK colonialism. And yet, BBC, none of this is news, which is why we're standing here today. Bias and silence in the face of genocide amount to complicity. Shame on you! We know that the dominant narrative in mainstream media is always that of the oppressed, of the oppressor, not the oppressed. Not today, because today we're going to hear from a range of speakers who are here to show their solidarity with the Palestinian people. Today we raise the voice of the oppressed. Today we call out those actively assisting genocide, the US, the UK, and call on everyone in our communities, in our trade unions, in our GAA clubs, in our local areas, and call on all political activists to challenge them in every way that they can and put as much pressure as they can for a ceasefire. We need an immediate ceasefire now, and that includes using the leverage of the Irish-American axis. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! So, ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Before I introduce the speakers, I want to thank each and every one of you for standing in solidarity week after week, day after day, with the Palestinian people. If anything gives us hope, it's your determination to continue. You give us hope, and South Africa and all those countries who supported her give us hope. Lastly, I want to thank all the solidarity groups that have worked to put this march and rally together. IPSC, TUFP, Kairos Ireland, Carja Palestine, Mothers Against Genocide for this amazing, and BDS Belfast. As a good friend of mine says, we're only as good as our last solidarity action. So thanks for coming today. Please listen to the speakers with respect. All their voices are equally important. I'm delighted to introduce as the first speaker, Claire Hanna MP. You have to share.
Thank you, Sue. For over 100 days, you've rallied and you've watched in horror the bombardment and the debasement of Palestine and what Irish lawyer Blinian Negreely rightly calls overt dehumanising language by Israeli military and government, a government that was on the far right long before Hamas's cynical attacks in October. This has been preceded by hundreds and hundreds of months of siege and occupation and humiliation of the Palestinian people, and just this week followed 7 days of near total media blackout, making life, if that's possible for Gazans, even more terrifying and making humanitarian assistance even more difficult. Journalists who are living in Gaza, worried about their lives, worried about their families and their safety, are the only things standing between the truth and a total news blackout. Without their work, the world would not be able to bear witness to the atrocities that are going on every day. They do that in spite of the numbers killed, in spite of, as Sue said, more than a journalist or a media worker per day being killed, never mind many others who are being injured or detained without trial. The International Federation of Journalists say that's a rate of media loss more than of combat soldiers in most wars. This is not an accident. We stand in solidarity with journalists around the world who document and who tell the truth, including some in the building behind me and in newspapers and in conflict zones around the world. We stand with them. Politics is catastrophically letting Palestinians down, I know that. But with parliamentary colleagues, including from the Green Party out of brought an NUJ-led motion to Parliament today about the death of journalists, calling on the UK government to use their voice and their influence with Israel, and one in support of the South African efforts in the International Court. Last week, we fought against the Tory anti-BDS boycott that seeks to tie the hands of your locally elected representatives who want to bring in ethical procurement policies. This week, we fought hard against the despicable Rwanda bill that seeks to demonise people who are fleeing places just like Gaza at this time. The international community has abided by this region for many decades, even when we've tried patience, and the people of Palestine deserve absolutely that and everything more. But through your solidarity and at all levels, eventually they will overcome. Ceasefire now.
Mark McTaggart! Is Mark McTaggart here? Will you come up, please? Mark. Mark McTaggart, Trade Union Friends of Palestine.
For weeks and weeks we've stood together, calling out the British government, the US government and governments across the world who have refused to see the plight of the Palestinian people, who have refused to do anything to prevent what has been going on in Gaza, the genocide that the Israeli army have been allowed to do. And it has been the people of the trade union movement and the citizens of this country and citizens across the world who have been calling for a ceasefire which will allow things to go, the goods that the Palestinian people in Gaza need to live. As a leader of a teaching union, I look in great despair with what has happened to the infrastructure for education across the Palestinian people, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, and the number of students who have been killed, and the number of teachers. But today we're talking about the number of journalists who have been killed. And it's the journalists who have educated us as to what's going on. It's the journalists who every day have gone out and have stood in solidarity and have been in Gaza where the bombs have been dropping to report to us, to tell us what's going on so that we can lobby our politicians to try to get them to call for a ceasefire. Unfortunately, all our calls have fallen on deaf ears to this point. But what I would do now is I would call on each and every one of us, in a time when the political parties are going to start coming around your doors, it's up to you to lobby those politicians. It's up to you to tell the politicians exactly how you feel. And it's up to you when the voting starts to vote for the politicians who support the people of Gaza. We're the people who can make the difference here. We are the people who will decide who makes the decisions. It's up to us to stand up for the people of Gaza and the people of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And it's up to us to point out to those who don't want to listen what's really going on. Ceasefire now.
I'm going to ask Councillor Ryan Carlin from Sinn Féin to speak now. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks. Israel's regime of apartheid unapologetically continues to violate international law before our very eyes. Israel is guilty of pursuing a policy of systematic genocide, displacement and annihilation against the Palestinian people. To date, over 24,000 Palestinians have been killed, 10,000 innocent children like yours and mine, bombed and maimed indiscriminately with the most sophisticated weaponry in this world. The extent of the devastation in Gaza is staggering. Entire neighbourhoods have been levelled and vital infrastructure has been obliterated. Hospitals continue to be targeted and are forced to operate and even amputate without anaesthetics or pain relief. They are all crimes against humanity. The blockade and ongoing bombardment have turned Gaza into hell on earth. The international community cannot remain bystanders. Today and every day we call for an immediate ceasefire, ensuring that humanitarian aid reaches those in desperate need, and call for a just and lasting solution that honours the rights and the dignity of the Palestinian people. We call on Western governments to cease all military and political support for Israel's ongoing genocide. We call on them to boycott, divest and to sanction Netanyahu and the Israeli regime until they cease their unending atrocities, end occupation and work to deliver a real and lasting peace to Gaza, to Palestine and across the Middle East. To the US, Britain and the EU we say, not in our name. To Ursula von der Leyen and her unwavering support for Israel, we say, not in our name. And the Irish government, who have their own part to play, we say, join South Africa's ICJ case against Israeli genocide. And tell the Israeli ambassador to pack her bags and to go. Today we march on the BBC. Over 120 journalists have been killed by Israel in the past 100 days. As licence fee payers, we challenge the BBC's complicity in this genocide. BBC coverage of the destruction of Gaza has not just been inadequate, but a disgraceful failure of journalism littered with editorial bias. It is regularly dehumanising, detached and indifferent to the overwhelming suffering being endured by Palestinians. As licence fee payers, we reject this skewed narrative. The BBC must stop masquerading its disproportionate coverage as balanced journalism. There is no balance in a conflict where only one side faces total devastation, destruction and annihilation. At its best, it is a distortion of reality. At its worst, a complicit attempt to sanitise Israel's war crimes. In the face of these relentless attacks, the resilience of the Palestinian people is extraordinary. Their struggle is a testament to the human spirit's endurance and its quest for freedom and for equality. Their plight is not just a Palestinian struggle, it is our struggle, and it is a struggle for all humanity. As Mandela said, our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. To the people of Gaza, the West Bank and the Palestinian diaspora, we stand with you. We stand with justice and we stand with freedom. Free Palestine.
I'm going to call on... I'm going to call on mothers. Okay, mothers, can we have the song and then the speaker from here's a speaker. Who was singing that amazing song on the march? Carwell too. Gotchin Shaw. Fanula.
Are you hearing our calls? Mothers against genocide are calling to you all. Strange things are happening, we're fighting for what's right. Will you come and join the fight? Ooh, Palestine, hoorah. Ooh, Palestine, hoorah. Ooh, Palestine, hoorah. Ooh, Palestine, hoorah. And well, to an tíomh ceart, ag seasamh leis an Palestine ag léirí ar neart. Ní neart go Carla céile agus seasamh muid an fód, ag seasamh leis an Palestine le misneach is broad. Ooh, Palestine hoorah, ooh, Palestine hoorah, ooh, Palestine hoorah, ooh, Palestine hoorah.
Edoi Gurmila. Anish, Niall from Mothers Against Genocide.
Thank you very much, Sue.
I'm sorry, I should say Daddy of Harry.
Yes, proudly Harry's father. As I watch the world in front of me play out, it has confirmed the notion that it is easier to fool a man than to convince him that he has been fooled. The Western media is obviously well aware of this notion, as their biased and dishonest reporting of the genocide in Palestine shows that they are no more than the propaganda wing of their imperialist taskmasters. This media bias is necessary for the tyrant to make the spending of your tax money a bit more palatable. The phenomenal asymmetry in casualties cannot be ignored, but you'll see that with the use of some creative language, it can be stomached just a little bit more easily. The manipulative use of language is shameful. We hear from the complicit Western media that Israelis that have been killed, hinting towards violence perpetrated, while Palestinians have died, as if there were no wrongdoing, as if they just ceased to be alive. We hear from the propaganda wing of the imperialist governments how a 19-year-old female IDF soldier is described as an innocent girl. She was a soldier. But the 3-year-old Palestinian child is a young lady. She was a tiny little girl. This deceitful language helps sanitize the atrocities that your tax money is paying for. There are endless examples of extreme media bias in the coverage of this genocide. None, however, are as glaringly obvious as the fact that not a single major Western media outlet covered the first day of South Africa's case in the ICJ. Yet every single one of these dishonourable and dishonest outlets live streamed the entire second day, literally silencing the voices that were making the case for Palestine and ensuring that every single moment of Israel's lie-riddled defence was streamed for the gullible audiences to swallow wholesale. Palestine is showing us its pain and suffering, yet we don't see. Israel refuses to let reporters in, yet they say they're hiding nothing. Israel claims that it's a holy land, yet I see a genocidal hothouse on a murderous rampage. Israel claims it hasn't attacked any hospitals, yet they're all destroyed. Israel just lies, lies, lies. The blockade of Gaza is every bit as cruel as the devastating carpet bombing. The reality of daily life in all parts of occupied Palestine is 100 times worse than we could even imagine. People having to choose between staying in their shelter and starving, or venturing out for flour only to be shot as the IOF use the opportunity to hunt as their bait is out. Since the media isn't telling the truth, it is up to us to continue to share the truth through social media, through conversations, and through undying activism. The empire has never been more exposed. The media has never been more exposed. The door is now ajar. We have to kick it in. Wear your cafes proud, wear your watermelon jumpers proud, and raise your voice loud. I'd like to finish by expressing my deepest sympathy to the fallen members of the press in Palestine, and I want to send love, strength and courage to Motaz and his colleagues. Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Thank you so much. Cheers to Palestine.
Although their coverage has obviously been despicable of what's happening in Palestine. Instead, I'm going to speak about what it means to be Irish. Because St. Patrick's Day is just around the corner. And on that day, our politicians are going to be flying out to Washington to engage in celebration about the special relationship that we Irish have with America. And so since it's a celebration of Irishness, I've been asking myself, what does it really mean to be Irish? And I guess what I've realised is that it really boils down to one fundamental thing, and that is the land. To be Irish is to love the land of Ireland. It is a sentiment that resonates with Catholics and Protestants alike, with people of all religion and people of none, who for one reason or another call this little island their home. It also resonates just as strongly with Palestinians, protectors of the land of Palestine, who feel duty bound not to allow it to fall into the hands of colonists who would extract from and exploit it. So to be Irish, and to be Palestinian for that matter, is to love your homeland, to love the land that feeds you, to love the land that you build a home on, and the land in which you bury your dead. So folks, it's only a difference of time, of geography, and of sophistication of technology which separates what happened here in Ireland with what is happening in Palestine today, because the same colonial mindset is behind it. When colonial Britain came to Ireland, they all but scrubbed from the face of the earth the native Gaelic culture that once thrived here. It was ethnic cleansing at its finest, and only traces of it have survived. They violently imposed upon us their language, their culture, their way of life, their politics and their economic structures, and they have corrupted our minds and our relationship to the land so completely that we can hardly even imagine anything else. Did you know that in the Irish language there's no direct translation for own, to own land? You would say it's late or it's lumpse or it's lesh or it's lehi. It's more a sentiment of it's with you as opposed to one of ownership. So it kind of reveals a way of thinking and a relationship to land, which is one more akin to stewardship than that of ownership. It was the British, colonial Britain, who brought those concepts and that language here. And they brought the culture of extraction and exploitation of the land with them as well, so that Ireland, which was once a rainforest, is now the most deforested country in all of Europe. And the population has not recovered from the famine. So, the same colonial mindset is at play in Palestine. And no surprise to us that the British are behind it, but who more so? The USA. So this St. Patrick's Day, we have an opportunity to do the Irish thing. Boycott. You see, boycott is a very Irish form of protest. In the 1800s, there was an English landlord called Charles Boycott, and in order to resist evictions, the workers organised and withdrew their labour. They shunned him socially, and they would not give him custom in their places of business. They isolated him from the community. So this St. Patrick's Day, instead of indulging the Irish-American stereotype of Irishness, one of the drunken, stupid party with leprechauns and shamrocks and four-leaf clovers, why don't we offer America and the world a more genuine gesture of Irishness and boycott St. Patrick's Day at the White House? To be Irish is to be anti-colonial. To be Irish is to stand on the side of the oppressed, not the oppressor. It is not to go and shake hands with a genocidal maniac. There's no two ways about it. Joe Biden is the facilitator of genocide, so you cannot stand on both sides of the fence. You're either on the side of the oppressed or on the side of the oppressor. So I guess we'll get to see this St. Patrick's Day what side our political leaders are on. Go Milan Wagons.
Slaughtered, millions of people displaced, and around at least 120 journalists killed. And this organisation behind me has went along with the dehumanisation of Palestinians. This organisation has went along with the demonisation of the pro-Palestine movement, whitewashed Israeli war crimes, parroted the lies of this genocidal apartheid regime. This cannot be described as lapses of judgment. This goes to the heart of the editorial policy of the BBC, and we say today, shame on them. And this organisation either repeats or tells us that the chant from the river to the sea is anti-Semitic, but yet when Netanyahu claims he wants an Israeli state from the river to the sea, he gets free rein. So call out the BBC, the reporting of what's going on, and especially over the last few days, a few weeks. What we've seen from the BBC is a parroting and a repeating of the propaganda of the British government from an organisation that's supposed to be impartial. Shame on them. As we've heard, refusing to give adequate coverage to the court case in ICJ from South Africa, whilst reporting every single moment of Israel's defence, if you want to call it that. But despite the barbarity, despite the brutality, and it's hard to say this sometimes, we'll have to be honest, Israel is losing the propaganda war. Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet are rattled. What's rattled them? Yes, it's the resistance of Palestinians, but it's also the tens of thousands of millions on streets across Europe and the world. That's what's rattling the regime in Israel. But we also have to ask ourselves, because when we're marching week on week, and fair play for everybody for still standing out and marching, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, and we do ask ourselves, can we make a difference? What difference are we making? What difference can we make at a small island on the Atlantic? I think it's very, very important to say we can make a huge difference. Look at what James Connolly said over 100 years ago when he's in this city, in this island. He says Ireland can strike a blow. You can strike a blow and have a ripple effect all across the world. We've repeatedly called for the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador. She should pack her bags and get out. But we also can't ignore or whitewash what Washington has done. I'll give you a commitment from me and my party. We're not going to go to the White House on Paddy's Day. Even though we got an invite with Rona Ben, but the US administration doesn't like socialists in Ireland. But I want to ask you, do you think parties north or south should go to the White House on Paddy's Day? I agree with you, absolutely. Because Israel could not commit its genocide. Israel could not commit its apartheid and slaughter if it wasn't for the bombs, the tanks, the checks, the money sent from Washington. Don't go on Paddy's Day. Don't take part in greenwashing, whitewashing Joe Biden. Just as the media has no excuse for ignoring and whitewashing the crimes and the genocide, parties here should have no excuse and make no excuse for shaking the hands of butcher Joe Biden. Isolate Israel on the international stage. Don't whitewash them, and don't go shake the hands with people who sign the checks to allow Palestinians being slaughtered on a mass scale. Free Palestine, solidarity, thank you.
Anish, it's my great pleasure to introduce Anthony Flynn, Councillor for the Green Party, who's been waiting patiently.
Thanks very much, Sue.
Firstly, I'd just like to thank the IPSC, other organisations here today, and the international BDS movement for continuing to keep the pressure and holding these solidarity marches and rallies. In a world that's beset by war and tyranny, we must remain focused on holding those in power to account for their continued support of the genocidal Israeli far-right regime. Across the world, we have just short of 750,000 people who are now experiencing what the IPC describes as famine levels of hunger. Palestinians in Gaza now make up 80% of that number. An entire population in Gaza of 2.2 million people are now in an emergency phase of food insecurity, children and the elderly most at risk. They face a catastrophe as the bombs continue to drop, disease continues to spread, and healthcare services cripple. The world is not doing enough to help them. As one of the incredible Irish lawyers from the South African case to the ICJ said recently, yet more Palestinian children will become WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family, the terrible new acronym born out of Israel's genocidal assault on the Palestinian population in Gaza. Israel is turning Gaza into a graveyard for children. Shame on them! Since 2015, the UK government has sent almost £500 million of arms exports to Israel, including components for aircraft, for missiles, for tanks and ammunition. The UK provides approximately 15% of the components in the F-35 stealth bomber, which is currently being used to bomb civilians in Gaza. Shame! Today we're calling for an immediate arms embargo on Israel. The UK can no longer hide its complacency in the murder of Gaza's children and continue arms exports in direct violation of international law. The Palestinian people deserve justice and they deserve freedom. The international community cannot continue to stand idly by and do nothing as this genocide continues. They can't deny the apartheid, they can't deny the ethnic cleansing, they can't deny the murder, they can't deny the death and the destruction. They can't deny their complacency. Sunak and Biden, you have blood on your hands. As we stand outside the BBC building today, let's not forget the claims made against this organisation in its deliberate dehumanisation of Palestinian lives being destroyed in Gaza and the lack of coverage of over 120 journalists, as we've heard, murdered in Palestine. Shame on them. We stand with brave journalists across the world who put their lives on the line every single day to get the truth in the face of the media blackout. We cannot and we will not relent in showing our support for the Palestinian people and their cause. Our local leaders in the Irish and the UK governments must be held to account. Our message must include our continued support for the international BDS movements and immediate sanctions on Israel. We must fight relentlessly for peace and use our voices loud and clear. Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine!
Okay, Karamina last. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Last but by no means least, Mohammed Samana, Palestinian journalist, fighter for freedom and justice for many years. Mohammed.
As a Palestinian freelance writer, and in honor of all Palestinian journalists and all Palestinians who have been killed by apartheid Israel, we'll have 1 minute silence, please. Thank you all. When I did a short course of journalism, any decent journalism school will teach that any news item should answer the 5 W's. What happened, why, when, where, and by whom. And let's put the BBC through this simple test of journalism. They tell us what's happening in Gaza is a conflict between Israel and Hamas. It's not. It's a genocide against the Palestinian people of Gaza. It's ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people in the West Bank and inside apartheid Israel. It's more than 1% of Gaza population being killed by apartheid Israel. It's almost 5% of Gaza population being either killed or wounded or missing. It's more than 50,000 Palestinian pregnant women not getting the care they need. It's more than 10,000 cancer patients sentenced to death by apartheid Israel because they bombed
the only cancer hospital in Gaza by planes provided by the United States. And to answer the home, Fergal Keel from the BBC told us, planes dropping bombs from the sky, people suffering on the ground. For God's sake, Fergal Keel, it can't be any simpler. Israeli planes made by the US killing Palestinians on the ground. They can't even say this. He's saying planes from the sky dropping bombs. No, they are Israeli planes killing Palestinians on the ground. Why don't you say who? It's basic journalism, Fergal Keel. It's basic journalism, BBC. And then when it comes to why, what, and where, they're telling us when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7. Well, let me tell you something they don't like to say. The area surrounding Gaza wasn't captured by Israel in 1948. It wasn't part of Israel in 1948. It was given to them by King Farouk of Egypt in 1950. So it's part of Gaza, illegally annexed by apartheid Israel. It wasn't their territory until 1950. So it's part of Gaza, it's not part of Israel. The surrounding of Gaza belongs to Gaza, not to Israel. And when it comes to what we know, they keep telling us Gaza is about 360 square kilometers. No, then it was more than 500 square kilometers. So all the area surrounding Gaza was part of Gaza and should return to Gaza. Now, they say as well about the when and the where and all of that. And let me tell them something about. It's not only about the surrounding Gaza. Gaza has been under blockade since for long decades. As far as I can remember, in the 1990s, Gaza students couldn't make it to universities in the West Bank. Patients couldn't make it to hospitals in Jerusalem and the West Bank, denied their right to medical care. Gaza and the West Bank been under illegal occupation since 1967. Most of them are refugees who were forced out of their homes in 1948, when apartheid Israel was created by Western colonial powers, especially after the infamous Balfour Declaration issued by the British government to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians and to create apartheid Israel. But maybe history is not the BBC thing. It's the organization that runs every year Children in Need. Children do not need media organizations that employ child abusers like Jim Savile. Children do not need media organizations that cover up for child killers in Palestine. Children of Gaza deserve their right to live, the first right in the Universal Human Rights Declaration. That's what the children need. The children of Gaza need to be in their homes, not in tents. That's even if they are lucky. The luxury life in Gaza now is to live in a tent, unaffordable by many of them. The children are in need of their right to access to health care. About 10 children a day have their limbs amputated, have one limb or more than one limb amputated because of Israeli apartheid bombing. Most importantly, children of Palestine are in need of the world to stand by them, to call for a ceasefire, to call for the end of the bombing of Gaza, and to call on the media to stop the complicity with apartheid Israel. One BBC journalist, unashamed, when three Israelis were killed inside Gaza by the Israeli army, he was interviewing an Israeli official, and the BBC journalist was making the lies as he goes along. He said, perhaps the three Israelis were made to wear clothes of Hamas fighters so that they get killed by the Israelis. The next day, apartheid Israel's own investigation said that the three Israelis were topless and they were carrying SOS flag. This shows how far the BBC journalist can go in covering up for apartheid Israel crime. Now, as we call for the ceasefire and to end the genocide and to end the bombing of Gaza, we call on the media to apologize for its complicity and to apologize for us the TV license for using our money to make propaganda for apartheid Israel. In the siege of Gaza, ceasefire now, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now.
Thank you, Mohammed. I forgot to say that Mohammed is a healthcare worker. A big shout out to all the trade unionists who stood up for themselves this week and for the people of Palestine. Okay, as I said before, you're only as good as your last solidarity action. We will be back. We will be here or at the City Hall or somewhere every week until Palestine is free, until we get a ceasefire. James is going to make an announcement. I just want to make an announcement about next week. Okay.
Sorry guys, just during the rally at the City Hall for trade unions, and you know about the